Starting a game collection from absolutely nothing can be a daunting task. You see people online, especially people like me that have big game collections that have been collecting for years, and you don't really know where to start. In this video, I'm talking about 5 consoles that you should start collecting for that are really cheap. Now, these are 5 consoles that I think you can really start and grow a huge collection and do it on a pretty cheap budget. So if you want to grow your collection in 2020, these consoles should help you. Starting off, we're going to go way back, and we're talking about the NES because honestly, this is a great system and the prices have fallen dramatically for this system. About 10 years ago, this system was skyrocketing in price, but now it's come down. And this is a really great system to pick up games for. You've got a ton of heavy hitters like your Marios, your Zeldas, and Castlevania, and other things like that. But you can also find a ton of cheap games for this system. Now, when I try to grow my NES collection, nowadays I will pick up any game that I don't have in my shelf if it is under $5. And quite honestly, I've gotten an extensive collection of the NES. I've got about 380 to 400 games, and so I could find a ton of games that are under $10 that are still a ton of fun to play, but are well worth it. Now, I love games like Blades of Steel on the NES, a great sports game. There's a ton of sports games that are fun. There's a ton of awesome platformers. Obviously, we gotta take that nod to Mario. Also, you've got all the 3 Marios and a bunch of other platformers. You've got Zelda, which was an amazing game, which is probably a more expensive game on the NES, but really it's not that expensive. And so I feel like overall, the NES has prices that are pretty low. Now, if you are looking at a game like Stadium Events, you're gonna pay way too much for that. But if you're looking for games that are fun to play and not necessarily the Little Samson or Bucky O'Hare games, you're definitely going to get good value out of it. And I think the NES is a great way to start because you're starting from almost the beginning on video games, at least gaming systems when it comes to the United States. And basically the NES brought gaming back to the US. So I definitely think it's a great way to start. Here we are still talking about huge consoles. The original Xbox. I absolutely love this system, and it's a great system to collect games for, not only because there are a bunch of great games on this system, but there are a bunch of games that you will be able to find in the wild that are definitely under $5. I go to my local Goodwill store or thrift stores, and I find Xbox original games there all the time for $4 or less, and honestly, I absolutely love it. The system is a ton of fun to play games for or games on, and they're still super cheap. Now, you've got your games like Halo that are absolutely amazing. It's really a great system for that, but it's got a ton of other games. If you like over-the-top ridiculous games, I've been playing like Shrek games like crazy. Those games, all of those cost me like $2 to $3. And I have them complete, so it's definitely well worth it. Or there's even some funny games like Celebrity Deathmatch or like Backyard Wrestling. Those are fun games, but there are also some expensive games on the system like Call of Cthulhu or something like that. But I definitely think this system is one that is readily available, and you can find the games like almost everywhere. Like when I go game hunting, it's usually an Xbox original game or a few others that I'll talk about in a bit, but I really do think the Xbox original is a great system to play. Not only does it have some of the best games, like think about all the Halo games, but it has so much nostalgia for me, and so that's why it has to be on this list, because not only does it have great games, but it's also very cheap to collect for. Staying in the same generation as the Xbox original, I'm going with the PlayStation 2. Obviously, this is a great system, and it is a ton of fun to play games for, but this falls into the same category as the Xbox original on many different reasons. First off, like I said with the Xbox, I always find games at the thrift store. Same with PlayStation 2. I have found so many awesome PlayStation 2 games that are just so much fun, and I think when I find them in the store. If I don't have them and they look fun, if they're $4, I will pick them up just to play them. You guys saw me recently play that Disney skate game, which was an absolute joke, or maybe Finding Nemo or Disney's Cars. There's a ton of games for the PlayStation 2, and I don't really want to get into all the expensive games because I talked about that in another video. If you haven't seen that, go check that out. But this system has either cheap games that are probably junk and not worth playing, to really good games that are still cheap, and then they have some really good games that are expensive. And I think this system has probably the most kind of games on the system from this list at least, and I definitely think this one is well worth it. And if you are into retro games, this is kind of the middle of the road. You're not talking about like the Xbox One, but you're not also talking about the NES, so you're still getting disc-based games, but you're not getting the newest and greatest graphics, but you're still having a ton of fun. And that's where I think these two systems kind of tie together and sit well on this list, is because the Xbox original and the PlayStation 2 are both nostalgic enough to play and have fun with, but they're still cheap enough that it's well worth picking these games up for $2, $3, $4, $5. You could still have a ton of fun, and it's well worth adding to your collection. Continuing on and moving into more of a newer era, we're talking about the Xbox 360. First off, I love this system. This is actually the 360 that I got, and I've played so many hours on this thing. I really, really do love this system. It's got some great games, and honestly, the prices on these games is going down so much. It just astonishes me to no end. Now, first off, obviously, I played Halo Reach and absolutely loved it on this system. That's my most played game on the system. I had friends. We would do this every weekend. We would get together and play together. We would make maps. We literally do everything we could in the game. But not only that, Halo is obviously Xbox's baby, and they did well off of it. But they had other games, like they had Resident Evil on this system. They had Borderlands. They had a ton of awesome games that you can literally find for $3 to $4 as well. Like, I know we talked about the other systems being earlier, but this was basically last gen. I know maybe like 2 gens ago, depending on how you see it, because the Xbox One is still kind of out and being released, so I don't know, you determine that. But this is a relatively new console when it comes to the grand scheme of things, but the games are so cheap on the Xbox 360, you almost cannot pass up picking them up. You can find bundles for these games and a console for basically nothing, and it's just a great way to start your collection. Now, yes, GameStop carries these, and other stores like that carry it, so it makes it a little bit more readily available, and GameStop has these games at actually pretty low prices. Not to publicly help GameStop out or anything, but I'm just letting you know that you can find Xbox 360 games for really cheap, and you don't even have to go thrifting. So if thrifting is something you don't want to do, or you're not comfortable with it, you can find Xbox 360 games at pawn shops, or like I said, Goodwills, or GameStop, or wherever you're going to look for games, you can find it. And honestly, it's a great system, and I had to add it to this list. We talked about the Xbox 360 and the Xbox original and the PlayStation 2, so you probably know we gotta talk about the PlayStation 3. Like, this system is a beast, a behemoth, and but seriously, this system has so many great games. I'm gonna set this down first. It's that heavy. But this system has a ton of great games, and I actually had a PlayStation 3 before I had an Xbox 360, and honestly, Uncharted is what grabbed me into this. This system came with Uncharted and a ton of other games that were awesome story-based, story-driven games, and I loved them so much, and that's why I was drawn to PlayStation 3 at the time. However, nowadays, those same games are dirt cheap. Just like the Xbox 360 games, these games are really low priced. Places are trying to get rid of them. They're not $20, $25 games. They're like 10 and under. You can get them complete for that price, and it's just well worth it. So when I think of a system that you should definitely get to start collecting that has cheap games, I have to think of the PlayStation 3 because of the vast library. It's got some awesome JRPGs as well. So if you like that, they have that for you, which the Xbox 360 doesn't. So I feel like this is where it is. The PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360 are definitely going by the wayside. They've been passed by the Xbox One and the PS4, and now the PS5 and the Xbox Series. So I feel like this system and the other system before it was definitely passed on because those new systems have come out. So it's got to be on this list because the games are so cheap. Too many people like to say that game collecting is hard or expensive, and it can be neither one of those if you do it right. Now, yes, if you're trying to go after those super rare games or the super expensive games, it can be hard and expensive. But if you're doing it and only searching for games that you want to play or systems that are well within your budget, you're going to find games that you enjoy, and it's definitely going to be well worth your time. So if maybe you have a low budget, maybe you are a kid and don't have a job, or maybe you're an adult and you have a job but you have other responsibilities and you don't have too much money to spend on games, this I hope helped you. I've got a ton of consoles, 5 to be exact, that I think are definitely well worth picking up. Every single one of these consoles I've played mini games for it, and I've loved all of them. And so I feel like they had to be put together on this list. If you can think of other consoles, comment down below and let me know. But that's all I've got for you guys. Peace. See you later.